Anyway, I'm Sarah, and we're going to be talking about tour and physics. We are going to go back into a schedule because that's how I do things. I need things to be scheduled. And so, yes, we're going back into a schedule. I'm going to have to write it down and look at it, but going back to a schedule. But today we're going to talk about tour and physics, and we're going to talk about the duality between counting the Omer. We count them by days and then by days and weeks, and why we do that and all that. But first, we're going to talk about some physics terms that might help you better understand the article. By the way, okay, all my sources and the articles themselves are always in the description for anybody who needs to read the whole article, because this article this week is quite long and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. So you are responsible, okay, to go into the description box and read it for yourself, okay? Just letting you know.
What is wave-particle duality? Wave-particle duality means that tiny things like electrons or light can act like particles or like waves, depending on how we look at them or what experiments we do. Think of a particle like a marble. It is in one place, and if you shoot it at a wall, it hits a specific spot. For example, if you shine a light through a tiny hole, sometimes it acts like a stream of particles hitting a screen in a single dot. Wave behavior. Now think of a wave, like ripples when you drop a pebble in water. Waves spread out, bend around corners, and can overlap to make patterns. If you shine light through two tiny slits, it can act like a wave, creating a pattern of bright and dark stripes on a screen, like ripples interfering with each other. Examples: when sunlight warms your skin, it feels like tiny particles hitting you. But when you see a rainbow after rain, light spreads and bends like a wave, splitting into colors. A quantum state is like a description of how a tiny thing like an electron or particle light is behaving at the moment. Think of it as a snapshot of all possible ways that the tiny thing could be, where it is, how fast it's moving, or what direction it's spinning. The wave function is a math tool scientists use to describe the quantum state. Imagine it like a magic map that shows all possible places or ways that a particle might be. Instead of saying the electron is right here, the wave function says it could be here or there or maybe both at once, with different chances for each spot. Picture it like a blurry cloud around a particle. The cloud is thicker where the particle is more likely to be found. The cloud is thinner where it's less likely to show up. When you look at the particle, the cloud snaps it into one spot and you see the particle just in one place. Quantum entanglement is when two or more particles become linked in a special way so that what happens to one instantly affects the other no matter how far apart they are. Imagine two magic dice. If you roll one and get a 6, the other one instantly shows a 6, even if it's on the other side of the universe. They're connected like best friends sharing a secret. As I mentioned, this article is quite lengthy and it's discussing all the various dualities that counting the Omer has, right? As we mentioned, we are counting first the days, and we are currently counting days and weeks. So what do these dualities represent? How can we think about them? And what is the purpose ultimately of counting the Omer? A day represents a physical phenomenon, a complete revolution of the Earth about its axis, which takes approximately 24 hours. We see it with our own eyes as a cycle of day and night, as the apparent movement of the sun across the sky, and other physical phenomenon caused by inertial forces arising in a non-inertial frame of reference. Counting days, therefore, is counting our progress in the physical world. Now, remember, this world is a reflection of the spiritual world, so as it is in this world, so it is above. On the other hand, there are no known physical phenomena associated with a week. It is purely a spiritual construct. We structure our lives around weeks because the Torah tells us that in the first 6 days God created the world, and on the 7th day, Shabbat, he rested. We are therefore instructed by God to follow this 7-day cycle by working 6 days and resting on Shabbat. Counting weeks, therefore, is counting our spiritual progress. Okay, so another thing that we've talked a lot about here, okay, especially with things like the Mandela effect and stuff like that, is whether or not time is linear. Does it start, we have all this progress, and it's done, or is time circular? We go in a circle, spiraling up or spiraling down, okay? How does it work? Especially when we understand this concept of the Gilgulim or the cycles, right? If we are doing well and we cycle up, and we do bad and we cycle down, is it really linear? How does this work? By contrast, Judaism's concept of time incorporates both notions of cyclical time and forward movement in time. Thus, the Jewish concept of time is akin to complex spiral with multiple periods, days, months, years, and sabbatical cycles, jubilees, and millennia, where each cycle represents a step forward in time. The cynical aspect of the Jewish calendar manifests itself primarily in annual holidays, which not only commemorate historical events, but as Kabbalah teaches, reenact these events on a spiritual level every year. These cycles, a day a year, sabbatical, a jubilee, are not merely repetitive of themselves, but add up in a constant progression towards universal redemption. Okay, so before I get into my position on this, I want to remind you that Kabbalah, while it might have a lot of insight, it might have a lot of knowledge, and very often Kabbalah does align with quantum physics, okay? Especially in our generation where these things are just now becoming revealed to us, but we don't understand them completely, okay? The truth that we have, okay, that God wanted us to know and that we needed to hold on to is from the Torah, okay? This is the truth, okay? Truth is the Torah, okay? So the Torah lays out a linear path for time, days, and weeks, okay? However, through Kabbalah, we've come to understand that there is a possibility of Gilgalim, which most people agree is factual, okay? What people disagree on is the nuances and the possibilities of how it might work. In my view, it's less like reincarnation and more like a multiverse, okay? You have a spherical timeline, okay? You're going up, you do well, you go up, you do bad, you go down. But how can we unite these two that makes both a linear timeline and a spherical timeline work? Through the multiverse, okay? The multiverse is a theory that basically says all the timelines are happening at once. All the possibilities for your life are happening at once. In one life, you might be making a whole lot of mistakes, every mistake possible, but in another life, you don't make any of those mistakes. You make different choices. Maybe it's just very slight, like in another part of the timeline, instead of wearing a tan shirt, I'm wearing a blue shirt, okay? Maybe I'm covering my hair all the way and not leaving any out. Maybe it's just minor things, okay? But overall, the timeline is happening at once, okay? Every possibility exists, and it's just playing out according to a linear time frame, okay? I hope that's clear as mud for everybody out there who understands what I'm trying to say. Clow and Pratt, Clow being a general principle and Pratt being a particular principle. In context of double counting of the Omer, weeks represent the Clow aspect, where days represent the Pratt aspect. We start with the recognition of the present of counting 7 full weeks between Passover and Shavuot. This is the Clow general view. We then zoom in on every constituent day to make sure that the day is counted in its literal and metaphorical sense. We count that day and make our days count. This is the Pratt view. Having worked and refined on the individual days, we put them back together into weeks, and we say today is 7 days, which is 1 week of the Omer. Today is more like 9 days and 1 week of the Omer, but who's counting, right? Okay, guys, I'm going to translate this word coming up differently. This word klayim is commonly translated as vessels, okay? But it actually means tools, okay? Kli, tool, vessel, instrument. Why am I harping on this when vessel is one of the options here? Okay, so let's just go back in time to when I was in conversion. When I think of a vessel, I think of something that can contain something else, right? Like, this is a vessel. You can put water in it. You can put pens in it, whatever. This is a vessel, okay? It could be used, I guess, technically also be a tool, okay, if you're using it for pencils. But why? It doesn't make sense. When I was in conversion, I remember, now I have Sephardi leaning, so it doesn't apply to me, but the Ashkenazim out there will understand. And I remember thinking it was really bizarre, okay, because it was the first time I heard of anyone doing this. The rabbi was talking about not creating a vessel on Shabbat. So he's talking about these cola bottles that if you open it, the cap can become a vessel. And I remember thinking, like, what in the world could that thing contain? A pill? Like, you're going to use it to hold your pills? Like, what are you going to use the cap of a cola for that it could possibly be considered a vessel? The word is tool. Okay, it is tool. Okay, it is something that you can use to aid to do something else, not necessarily to contain something. Maybe I'm the only one that was under the understanding that vessel means something that can contain something else, like a boat contains people and it is called a vessel. Like, I don't know, but it is something that I remember hearing this thinking, what in the world? What in the, like, and nobody in the Sephardi community does this. Everybody just opens their cola bottles, no problem. But I just remember being so confused by it. And honestly, calling it a tool still makes it confusing because what are you going to use it for? But, okay, it's less confusing than calling it a vessel. That's all I have to say. Some of the most important concepts of Kabbalah are orot, light, and kleim, tools. In Kabbalah, light is a metaphor for a divine emanation. Klei, simply speaking, is something that holds spiritual light as a vessel would. Actually, a tool is a spiritual information processing system. It receives the information, processes it, and outputs the measure of light that can level immediately below and absorb and process. Another useful metaphor for a klei is a colorful glass. When the white light goes through a colored glass, most of the spectrum is absorbed, with only a narrow band of spectrum representing that specific color of the glass being let through. Similarly, a klei absorbs most of the light that it shines into, allowing only a small measure to pass through. From the point of view of Kabbalah mysticism, the 24-hour cycle of a day is due to 24 permutations of the letters of the proper name of God known as Tetragrammaton, or Havaya. This name, called Tetragrammaton, is because it is made of the 4 letters Yud He Vav He. The number of all possible permutations of the 4 letters is 24. Each permutation rules over a particular hour. We also note that only 3 of the 4 letters are unique, thus only 12 permutations are distinct. This is why, according to Kabbalah, the 24-hour day is divided into 2 12 periods. Furthermore, Kabbalah teaches that the first He and the second He, albeit the same letter, represent different partsufim. Therefore, the first 12-hour period and the second 12-hour period differ in that one describes the night hours and the other the day hours. Yet another view holds that the day hours are under spiritual influence, the name Havaya, whereas the night hours are under the influence of the name Adonai. The 7-day cycle we call a week is related to another spiritual system, 7 emanations, midot, or character traits. Kabbalah teaches us that on one hand there are 50 gates of wisdom, referring to the 50 levels of holiness, and on the other hand there are 50 gates of impurity. The sages tell us that spiritually Egypt was the lowest place on earth, the 50th gate of impurity. Living in Egypt and adopting many of the Egyptian customs, the Jewish people fell into the penultimate level of impurity, the 49th gate. They were not worthy of redemption. Nevertheless, God pulled his children from the depths of impurity in one fell swoop. Instead of climbing the ladder of spiritual ascent one rung at the time, the Jews skipped all the rungs, all the levels of holiness, and were pulled out of the spiritual abyss of Egypt. This is why, according to Kabbalah, the holiday on which we celebrate the exodus from Egypt is called Pesach, to skip, because we skipped 49 levels of impurity. What we celebrate during Passover is a quantum leap. Skipping levels is a characteristic feature of the holiday. Okay, he's using this term quantum leap. What does it mean? We were talking earlier about the timeline, okay? And we're talking about your soul being spread out over the Gilgalim, the multiverse, okay? Which states that all these events are happening at the same time. Your soul left Egypt, okay? At the same time, your soul is reading the story, the remembrance of leaving Egypt. They're happening at the same time, okay? Pesach happens at the same time every year across all the multiverses, across all the Gilgalim. It's happening at the same exact time. So what happened? What does it mean to quantum leap? Quantum leaping means to pull something from one timeline into another. So if there is a timeline where you were at the maximum spiritual level, you're at the 49th spiritual level, okay? And in this timeline, you're not, okay? You're knocking on opposite of heaven's door, okay? At a low level like this, you cannot pull into a timeline. You would not be able to do it. That's why God had to do it for them. God had to quantum leap for them, okay? But at a high spiritual level, you would be able to pull something. You can pull an abundance of something into your current timeline at a high level, okay? This is what quantum leaping is, okay? It's all you, your soul is spread out across this, but it's being able to access that level of consciousness, okay, which they were unable to do in this point in the timeline because of their low level. So in a great miracle and a great mercy, God did it for them.